Here are 5 industries desperately paying for AI automation today. Let's start it off with number 1, the coaching and consulting business. First off the bat, coaching and consulting is awesome for AI and automation agencies, primarily because of the very high engagement cost, okay? What that means is if you can land, let's say, 1 client for an average coaching or consulting business, you can make them $10,000. And let's say you charge, I don't know, $5,000. Well, with just 1 client, you're already producing a 2x ROI. What if you get a coaching and consulting business 3 clients? Well, now you're making $30,000. On that $5,000 cost, you're basically producing a 6x multiple. So AI automation agencies that are specifically involved in growth tend to find this niche very, very good and very profitable to work with for that result. Another thing is they rely on personalized communication a lot. Usually you have some head guy or chick that is like the personality, okay? I say Sam Ovens here, not Sam Altman, for a specific reason. Obviously, he is that person in his business. And to some extent, no matter how many sub-coaches you will get on your team, okay, if this is the amount of revenue you're making, this is the amount of time you're making, they generally scale 1-to-1, right? 1 unit of time, maybe 1 hour of that coach might be worth, I don't know, $2,000 or something. So if you want to make $20,000, how many hours do you have to spend? Well, 10 hours, right? 10 times 2,000 is 20,000. So what this means is if you can build automated systems that increase the angle or the slope of this line, even just a tiny bit, through some sort of system that just makes that person's time 5% more efficient, and this is the angle, okay? Over a long enough period of time, you can earn them a ton of money. And that's where your services come really in handy, and they tend to be willing to pay you high prices to justify that. Another big issue is there's a very high customer acquisition cost. This makes sense, right? If the engagement cost is very high, if when you get them a new customer, the customer tends to pay like $10K, it's not uncommon at all that the business will spend, I don't know, like $1,000 to acquire that customer. And actually, just a little bit of an aside here, not related to AI automation agencies, if you can find a business model in which the customer acquisition cost and then the average order value or the engagement cost is really out of whack, aka you get a ton of average order value for very little customer acquisition cost, that's a great niche because you can just pour tons of money in and then make large multiples on this, right? Usually there's some gotchas or some catches, but this is a big one for AI and automation here because you usually can improve margins. If you can improve margins by a few percentage points, think about taking something from 20% to 21%, and then think about taking something from 10% to 11%. If you can bring somebody's margins from 20 to 21, you're improving by about 5%. Their business is making 5% more money. If you can go from 10 to 11%, you're actually improving their entire company by about 10%. Mathematically, this relationship holds true even more so for very, very low margin businesses. Let's say you start at 3%, you go to 5%. I mean, if you think about it logically, my math ain't so good. 5 over 3, what's that? You're improving that person's business by like 30% or something like that. Again, math ain't so good, don't hold me on it. But you can have a very outsized impact with very little actual work. A lot of coaches and consultants have recurring revenue models. So My Communities, Maker School, and MakeMoneyWithMake.com, for instance, they may not cost very much upfront, but if you extrapolate them over the course of a year or two, you can make a ton of money, obviously, per person, so long as you continue delivering value. And there are a couple of other issues here, like admin tasks, which are shared between a bunch of the niches I'm going to show you. A lot of these coaches and consultants are like information people, so they track their progress and metrics. That makes it pretty easy for you to jump in there. And then it's pretty reputation based, so if you can deliver a higher or better quality customer experience, you typically go very far. Here are a bunch of automations and systems that I've talked about on my channel that you guys could sell. I've talked about client onboarding flows, which just automate the hell out of these things. That's great to sell. Content delivery systems, some sort of like content multiplier is great. So some sort of repurposing or whatnot. Some sort of payment collection and automated invoice follow-up is great because typically that's the way that these services do business. Some sort of community management automations or systems. And again, when I say systems, this doesn't have to necessarily be a like cloud system. This can actually just be a series of SOPs or some sort of process documentation. Some sort of follow-ups. Lead nurturing can be really big for these guys. Even like RAG FAQ chatbots. So you could make like an AI version of a coach. This is pretty interesting nowadays, where you feed all of the YouTube videos, all of the content in their communities, all of the documents that they've written into this RAG bot, and then basically just have it be like the artificial intelligence version of Nick or of Sam Ovens. You can usually charge a little bit on that. So lots of really cool systems here. You guys are going to get this doc just embedded in the description. Feel free to check that out. But for the sake of time, let's move on to industry number 2, which is recruitment, staffing, and offshore talent agencies. All right, so I think we all know who this beautiful bastard is. Recruitment is essentially, for those of you that don't know, the process of pitching a company on your ability to hire the best talent for that company, okay? So if you are working with a recruitment business, the reason why this is such a fantastic niche to be in is because if you think about it, these recruitment businesses deal with hundreds, if not thousands of candidates every single week. They're constantly in communication with them. And usually the communication tends to be pretty similar. And they have a lot of stages they need to move people through. Okay. So anytime you have high volume of repetitive tasks, anytime you have like lots of manual communication, you basically have an automation goldmine. And that's where, one of the reasons why recruitment staffing and offshore talent agencies are just blowing the hell up right now as a niche for AI and automation agencies. Tons of people in Maker School, Make Money with Make, are printing money working with these niches, specifically because if you can, again, automate 10% of 1,000 tasks, you can obviously demonstrate a lot of value to the company. Another thing is these recruitment companies, because they deal with really high volume repetitive tasks, if you can just find a way to like log things, which I'll talk about in a second, and if you can like make that logging consistent, you can typically deliver a lot of value for them too. So every time a new candidate replies or something like that, you can log that to some sheet showing the average candidate conversion rate or average candidate reply rate. Stuff like this is really, really good, and it's quite a low-hanging fruit. A lot of the time you also have like kind of a digital first industry. So tech savvy, a lot of the time recruiters just already understand things like cold email platforms, which is nice. And then again, notice how we have 5 to 20K placements here. So one of my clients that I used to work with was an awesome executive recruiting firm. And the way that they place C and high B-suite level staff members was they were doing, I think it was like 20% or something like that of first years. What that means is if they're placing a $200,000 role, right, they make 20% of the first year's salary. So the company pays them $40,000. How cool is that? Okay. Imagine making $40,000 in a single customer you land with one of these clients. If you're a growth AI automation agency like I am, an agency that specializes specifically in driving lead flow, improving, conversions, improving sales and breaking constraints and bottlenecks on that end. Obviously, if you could just get them one more per month, you could justify maybe up to like a $10,000 a month service, which is great. And that's only one. I mean, if you can get them multiple, geez. And then, they usually have very data-rich databases, right? And then some of these models are recurring, which obviously just multiplies whatever you're doing by whatever the average churn is. So lots of really cool systems you could sell them that I've talked about on my channel and in my communities as well. Candidate pipelines, candidate sourcing systems. These are basically just cold email systems, okay? You could also do, obviously, employer sourcing systems. That's really cool. So that's just outreach. Automating some of the client comms or some of the candidate comms as well is pretty big. So instead of you having to, have a team of 20 recruitment agents whose sole jobs it is to message candidates back and do all of that laborious communication, you can actually automate the vast majority of it. And then you could just have them show up on calls and stuff, just with some intelligent stage changes, some email watchers and whatnot. You can do things like automated reference checks. This is kind of neat. There's some APIs that you can call that'll automatically do some things, as well as including record checks and so on and so forth. And then you could also do obviously personalized cold outreach to employers and stuff. Okay. As well as candidate reactivation systems, placement tracking dashboards. Man, have I talked about a lot of systems on my channel. Let's move on to niche number 3, the digital marketing and creative agency. Now, I've talked about this a lot. Okay. Digital marketing and creative agencies are fantastic for people like us. The main reason why is because 1, you have high engagement costs. Again, of 3 to 50K. At a certain point, I'm pulling numbers out of my ass. You could charge $150,000 to $50,000 for an agency project if you're pitching to the right people. Most smaller B2B agencies that do, PPC or creative or ads or SEO or whatever, they might charge like $2,000 or $3,000 a month, right? But anyway, this is a super digital industry. And the more digital an industry is, the easier it is for you to acquire these leads in the first place. So if you think about like your likelihood of winning is just a big equation. And on the very beginning of this equation, which for you guys would be over here, okay, the very first factor, if that's just really high and really easy to do, if you could just scrape all digital agencies in the United States in legitimately like 5 minutes with Apollo or Appify or LinkedIn, then obviously everything else downstream is going to be a lot easier to do, right? Also, these guys typically check their email inboxes quite a bit. I say this as an agency owner who used to run a digital marketing business. So you typically have a pretty direct line to communication, a direct line to making something happen. And I'm a big fan of this niche personally, and this is probably one of the most common ones that I'll build systems for. They also typically have pretty crappy margins. They also typically have low billable time and heavy admin. Now, average agency margins might be like 30% to 40%, right? Contrast that with my business, for instance, which might be like 80% to 90%. Now, again, if we just do that math comparison, if I were to add 5% margins to this business, well, maybe I just took them from 30 to 35%, which is a 1/6 growth of the business. If I were to add 5% to this business, well, maybe I just took them from 80 to 85%, which that's like a 1/16 or something like that. That's 1/6, that's 1/16. It's going to be a lot harder to justify any business that is not a low margin business. Okay, another big issue is typically this is a very low barrier to entry industry to begin with. So the people that come in, they don't really know how to do things like client communication. And so there are a lot of very simple systems you can implement to substantially improve the quality of their communication, the quality of things like their timelines, the quality of things like their time tracking. And yeah, it's kind of a low bar. The reason why is because you just don't really need anything to start an agency. That's actually one of the benefits of AI automation agencies, if you think about it. Back in the day, you used to have to spend several hundred or maybe thousands of dollars to get a business up and running. You had a bunch of capital expenses. You need to get an office. You needed to procure a bunch of equipment and heavy materials and stuff like that. Nowadays, with an AI automation agency, the cost is literally, you watch a few of my YouTube videos and then you spend a few $100s and then voila, you now have like a fully thriving business that's registered with the government. That's pretty badass, right? But, that also means because it's easier, you get a lot less talented entrants into the market that need help with simpler systems that you can deliver outsized values with. So yeah, I'd say that these are the vast majority of the main reasons here. Here's some automations you could sell them. I want to say with this niche, you could sell any of the former automations of this one too, and you could sell any of these to basically any of the other businesses. Agencies are like the core fundamental business model here. Recruitment agencies, offshore talent agencies, there's still types of agencies. So anyway, a PM automation is really big. What does that mean? That means you do something like a Monday.com or a ClickUp or maybe, I don't know, an Asana build, maybe like some sort of Slack project management build. And what you do is you help them break down tasks, which typically involve multiple people on a team, and give them one centralized place to coordinate all this stuff, which just makes their lives a lot easier. Client intake systems, again, just because of the low bar, building a simple client intake system where they just get an email or something like that when they sign up adds a ton of value. Some sort of resource allocation dashboard. Now, this is typically done automatically if you're using a service like Harvest or, I don't know, some of these like more advanced time trackers, but inside of some CRMs like ClickUp, for instance, and I believe Asana as well, and probably Monday.com, probably not Slack though, you can actually just automate like the creation of a dashboard that shows where people's times are spent at various parts of their week, which can be pretty important. Same thing with the time tracking. A big thing is invoice and payment automation, obviously, because, the bar is very low. And so if you can employ some sort of system to collect on invoices that are outstanding, typically the company can make a ton more money. I mean, I can't tell you the number of times. The main issue with a new agency that I come in to consult with is literally that they just have like $50,000 in outstanding revenue that they haven't collected on. And I'm like, all right, so are they just not paying you? Did you just do a terrible job? And it's like, no, we just keep on forgetting to send the invoices, and then it's 3 months later, and then the person just doesn't really want to pay us, right? They kind of forget about it or something. This is, believe it or not, a very real issue. Anytime I come into a new agency and I do any sort of consulting, like one of the first things I check is like, okay, do you have some sort of system that consolidates and then consistently follows up on invoices? No? All right, well, I mean, that's a big problem. Let's start there. Obviously, since agencies typically deal with proposals, and proposals are typically these beautiful branded things. If you can just automate the hell out of this process, maybe with like a form that somebody fills out that templates out a proposal, sends an email, and then, I don't know, follows up or something like that a week later, you can add a ton of value to the sales process there. Yeah, you can do other stuff like client feedback collection, organization of assets, doing some sort of human in the loop Q&A, and then obviously AI for the production of assets as well. It's pretty big nowadays. Really big niche, big fan of it. Let's go to B2B tech and high touch SaaS companies for number 4. These high touch SaaS companies are pretty great. When I say high touch, just to distinguish, there's kind of two different types of SaaS companies. There's low touch SaaS. Low touch SaaS is basically like a simple photo editing app or something that costs $5 a month. The idea is that company is low touch because they don't require human beings to manage you. They just build a beautiful onboarding experience. They have some FAQs, they have some guides in their software platform, and then it's just hands off. You pay a small monthly amount. Obviously, you get onboarded through these automated methods and everything is good. Now, contrast that to a high-touch software as a service company. High-touch software as a service companies are typically a lot bigger. They work with like older and more established niches, and they cost way more money. And in order to work with one of these, you usually need to sign up for some sort of demo. You need to have their sales team walk you through things. You need to contact them, okay? If you guys want examples of this, check out any of my previous niche videos. I'll literally show you guys like example websites where I walk you through their sales flows and how they sign people up and how that distinguishes between high and low touch. But the issue with low touch, obviously, hopefully you guys could see what the problem is right off the bat. I mean, if you're going $9 per month, and even if somebody stays with you for a year, $9 per month times a year is 108, I think. $108, right? That's your lifetime value of the customer. Contrast that with a high-touch SaaS. High-touch SaaS might be $500 a month, and it might stay for a full year. Now, if they stay for a full year, that's $6,000, okay? On the low end, and a lot of these are way higher. This is usually just like the introductory price plan. You might be paying like $1,800 a month, and the average person might stay on for 24 months. And I don't know, that's like over $20,000. I think it's like 24K or something close to it. So as you guys can see, the multiples tend to add up. So high customer lifetime value, cha-ching, done. They also typically have complex multi-touch sales cycles. So like I said, they have like demos and stuff. High-touch SaaS companies' sales processes tend to reflect agency sales process quite a bit with their proposals and their quotes and their estimates. So that makes this a very good niche to come into because you can build all the same systems you build for some sort of agency that produces way more of a multiple on their time, but you can do so for this business with no additional cost or resource on your end. You produce way more money for them, which is obviously always a win. Typically, at least in my experience anyway, and I've said this a couple times, and I haven't had anybody just super disagree with me yet, so I'm gonna keep on saying it. Stack of disconnected tools. Most of the high-touch SaaS companies that I've worked with, they tend to be companies that like raised a fair amount of money over the last couple years. And so when you spend a bunch of money that isn't yours, you tend to be a lot less effective and efficient in the way that you allocate that. When companies grow really quickly, they end up with this big stack of disconnected tools that typically cost a lot of money. And a lot of these high-touch SaaS companies, if I'm honest, use other high-touch SaaS companies as like parts of their fulfillment arm or like, to manage their business or whatever. And typically like these are just a lot of money. So I actually have produced a sizable amount of value, literally just coming into a high-touch SaaS business, auditing their whole tech stack from start to finish, and then, I don't know, giving them $2,000 or $3,000 a month back because I find much lower cost or lower paying alternatives. Think about that. May not seem like a lot, but if I could save a company $2,000 a month, if I could do that in the first month, I just saved them $24,000 a year within the first month. How many months does that buy me essentially to come in and then produce a demonstrable ROI before I have to worry about, I don't know, my position or my status as their agency partner? Quite a lot, okay? And that's every month, this opportunity cost that you're saving them forever. They typically track things a lot, so data-driven decision-making. I mean, these people work with software, right? So a lot of KPIs in software also makes them pretty automation-friendly, I would say. And typically you can also get some help and resources from the dev guys, some webhook or something like that. Because the person that is typically buying this service tends to be very nuanced. It's like usually some financial services technology company or some health companies, whatever, right? Some super nuanced problem that's at the intersection of 17 different problems right over here. That's usually their SaaS audience. That's who they deal with. There's typically like some very nuanced pain points that they deal with. And if you can build even simple systems that improve their ability to tackle or deal with those pain points even a bit, you can demonstrate a ton of value. And typically, because this is a SaaS company, SaaS companies tend to have really good margins, right? So a high-touch SaaS company, less so because you have sales teams and stuff. But if you have over 70% margins, that's actually a positive, not a negative, like I was talking about before, because that typically means they just have a lot of disposable income. That plus the fact that a lot of these companies raise and have fundraising rounds, a year or two ago earliest, then that means that you typically have a lot of money to play around with. They're a little bit less, I want to say, scrupulous when it comes to hiring you. Obviously, I'm just giving all of this to you through the lens of my own experience. These are all companies that I've obviously worked with, but those are my beliefs on that matter. Lots of cool systems you can sell these guys. Lead qualification systems. This is essentially just like a CRM. CRM comes in depending on the cost of the person or their answers to whatever your sales questionnaire was or your contact us questionnaire. You route them to specific people. You could do some sort of demo booking automation. You could personalize the hell out of your outreach. What's really cool about high-touch SaaS companies is you can typically do outbound. Now, you can't really do outbound very well for like low-touch SaaS companies. I mean, I've done it before, but I don't know. I just find people are a lot less likely to care. Usually the primary sales mechanism with these low-touch SaaS companies is like ads. It's either ads or it's organic or it's some sort of personal branding. But with high touch, you can actually get away with running like cold email campaigns at scale. I guess just because it's such a more like human sort of business model where, it's expected that there's going to be somebody demoing you and somebody selling you, that these salespeople's times just slot right into this pre-existing process. But yeah, I've sold a lot of personalized sales outreach as well, which I'd recommend. And then, there are a bunch of other systems here. I think I'll just leave it at that because I want to make sure this video can be under 30 minutes. But yeah, a lot of value here. Probably the last one I'll cover is just support tickets. This is probably one of the only places where I think an N8N AI agent actually makes sense today, as of the time of this recording, because you could just have very simple, like a support routing system, where basically every time a new ticket comes into a specific email address or something, you could just add it to your N8N agent, and then you could have just that agent call like 1 or 2 predefined tools, which just do things like, calculate the refund percentage. If the amount of money that this person has asked for refunds for in the past is lower than the amount of money that they've paid you, and your ratio is, 2% or something, just automatically process it. Or, some automated feedback collection mechanism when somebody decides to cancel on you. A lot of different ways you could do this, but I actually think that customer support is probably the only situation in which these agents make sense as of the time of this recording. So you could sell that as well. And yeah, that takes us to the final niche, which is financial services / companies. Now, I should make a caveat to all this stuff. The issue with these, and the reason why I'm saying them last, well, if you find a company like Jordan Belfort's, then absolutely go for it. I don't think you'll have any of the issues that I'm talking about. But the one issue with this niche, okay, is depending on how big the company is and how into upholding regulations they can be, you may have to deal with some regulations. You guys know how healthcare, you have to deal with like obfuscation of customer details and stuff, like, patient records and so on and so forth have to comply by HIPAA. Well, there's some financial companies, like financial services companies, that think a lot similarly to that. And, there are a lot of these regulations and whatnot that they have to uphold. And if you don't tick every single box, and if you don't do all these systems on your own hardware and your own software and like on-prem and off the cloud and so on and so forth, this can be kind of annoying, but not all companies are like this. I've worked with a few that aren't. Let me just run you through some of the logic first. We can talk about that afterwards. The first is very high client lifetime value. The second is they have ongoing reporting and compliance. This compliance aspect, okay, you can actually automate large portions of compliance, which is awesome. So tons of value in automating compliance. This is usually like the big burden in a lot of these businesses. And if you could just be like, hey, I can automate, 30% of all the compliance here so that it's just like human in the loop Q&A, these companies will love you. A lot of high touch client communication, obviously. So tracking that communication, building systems and SOPs around that communication is a lot of value. And then also a lot of these companies have just way too much admin. They don't have a lot of advising. The benefit is a lot of these guys typically work with like spreadsheet tools and stuff like that anyway. So if they're familiar with how to do this sort of stuff, and if they're using it all, if you're using spreadsheets and databases informally already, then usually you could sprinkle in very little work, okay? But you could have an outsized impact on their processes with, a couple of make.com automations or N8N flows or something. A lot of these financial services companies that have MRR, obviously, that gives you a ton of leverage with automation, like I think I said lifetime value here, but really, that's just like per engagement or whatever. I think a lot of these financial services companies can be up to $500K realistically. Obviously, really high customer acquisition costs. So because of that, the better you can make their margins, the happier they'll be. That plus the compliance burden, I think, is really the main value. And yeah, there are a couple of cool systems that I built before on my channel that I'll run you guys through. Obviously, client onboarding is really big. What's interesting with these financial services companies, I find, is a lot of the clients that you work with. I don't know if it's just like older school or it's just a byproduct of just like the finance mindset, but customer relationships are very, very important. If you could make a customer relationship even 5% better, if you could make a person feel paid attention to even 5% more, if instead of some sort of automated calendar reminder, you could make it seem like you wrote that yourself, or instead of some sort of clearly templated introductory onboarding message or email, you could make it seem like you wrote that yourself right there. Typically, there are large implications as to the health of that relationship over time. And because these customers tend to be so sticky and a little bit older school, at least in my experience, that sort of value goes a really, really long way. So if you can make it like very high touch and perceivably customized, then these relationships can pay hundreds of thousands, if not millions. Okay, cool. Then content personalization, which kind of feeds into that. You do things like compliance monitoring or some sort of automated compliance, automated Q&A. And then a lot of the time, the thing that I find silly is these people, they usually use some sort of like document or file service a lot. Like they'll use like Google Sheets or Google Docs, or they'll use like Excel, or they'll use OneDrive or whatnot. Literally just like coming in from an outsider's view, somebody that hasn't actually been inside of the company, and just organizing everything for them can actually have a tremendous amount of value. You could have some sort of project manager or CRM or whatever they're using. And every time a new record gets created, you could just create a Google Drive that houses all of the data and assets for that particular record. And you could come in and you could be the hot shot that just like, improve their margins by 5% by doing so. So I think there's a lot of alpha in these like older school industries, but what's really cool about this business is a lot of it's just like text-based. So you could just slot in a lot of these AI workflows in without much of an issue. Okay, great. That's that. Hopefully you guys appreciated this video. I want you to know that you'll find all of this data, everything that I just showed you, in the description down below. If you guys like hearing about how to take take AI and automation, which I think a lot of people typically think is an engineering problem, and then making it more of a business problem instead. Where to find leads, how to approach leads, how to build funnels and flows, and how to really just start an AI and automation business that actually works. Definitely check out Maker School. It's my 0 to 1 automation business roadmap where I run you through everything you need to do to acquire your first customer in 90 days or less. And I even guarantee your money back at the end if you don't end up hitting that goal. Otherwise, if you guys already have an AI and automation business and maybe you're watching my videos to up level your knowledge, check out Make Money with Make. It's my automation community where I take businesses that are already working and then I help you scale up to 25K a month and beyond. Very thankful that you're still with me at the end of this video. Like, subscribe, do all that fun YouTube stuff, and I'll catch y'all in tomorrow. Thanks so much.